Welcome to the RotoWire Prospect Podcast. I'm your host, James Anderson, and we are live with the great Jim Callis. And we do this show every year. Jim is kind enough to give me some of his time and tell us about all these draft prospects. And it's an interesting class this year, Jim. MLB Pipeline has Ethan Holliday ranked number 1 in this class. There's Eli Willits, Aiva Arquette, Billy Carlson, and JoJo Parker are the other 4 hitters in the top 10, but they're kind of in the 5 to 10 range with Holliday at 1. So my first question for you is Ethan Holliday in a tier by himself among the position player prospects in this class, or would you include like a Willits or others with him in that top tier?
I think Willits is kind of on the top tier as well. Sorry, I have a camera problem there for a second. Willits is on the top tier as well. Like nobody's really separated themselves in this class at all, James. And that's what makes it tough. Is it's not like last year or 2023. Even though we do have Ethan Holliday number 1, and I like him a lot as a player. If Ethan Holliday was in 2023, I don't think he goes in the top 5 picks. And if he was in last year's draft, I don't think he necessarily goes in the top 7 picks. He and Willits are different types of players. I do think it's them apart from everybody else, but again, not by a wide margin. With Holliday, it's more, that power ceiling. He's built like his dad, Matt, more than his brother Jackson. Hits left-handed, unlike his dad. But the type of guy that you could dream of 40 homers a year from Ethan Holliday. Whereas Willits is more of that well-rounded player at the same stage of their careers, kind of similar to Anthony Volpe, but I think he's quicker than Anthony Volpe was at the time. I think the question with Willits is, I think he's got the highest floor. He might be your most well-rounded position player of anybody in this draft. It just comes down to, do you think he's going to be a 15-homer guy, 12 to 15, or do you think it might be 18 to 20? Are we getting to average power? Because if it's average power, it could be solid to plus hitter, plus runner. It doesn't matter for fantasy purposes, but like good defender at shortstop too. And if you got to average power, that would be obviously a very good play.
Right. Yeah, he's got the stolen bases working in his favor. Doesn't seem like Ethan Holliday is going to bring that much speed to the table. Is that right?
Yeah, that's fair. Like from a fantasy standpoint, I mean, Ethan Holliday, he struggled on the showcase circuit a little bit last year, but I'd say if you're realistically going Ethan Holliday, you'd say average hitter on the 20 to 80 scale, 65 power, which is well above average. Like you said, not much of a runner. He's probably average now, and he could get bigger. He's already 6'4", 210. Whereas Eli Willits could be plus hitter, plus speed. Even if he's a 15-homer guy, that's still a valuable fantasy player because he's going to stay at short. Ethan Holliday probably winds up at third base.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim, the guys that kept getting me excited, at least in sort of the top half of the first round of this class, were the college starting pitchers, which obviously is not necessarily what you want for fantasy in a draft, but Kade Anderson from LSU seems to have kind of emerged over the past few months to become the consensus top pitcher in the class. What kind of big league starter do you think Kade Anderson is going to become?
Yeah, I was going to say this draft, I don't feel like it's like your cup of tea from a fantasy perspective because you usually want the college bats and not the strength of this draft compared to the last 2 years. You have a bunch of college pitchers and high school shortstops. So I got to do a little bit more risk taking, I guess, this year. Yeah, I think Kade Anderson, he's not, and I feel like I'm knocking these guys by comparing him to the last 2 drafts. This is a below average draft, especially to the top of the last couple of drafts. But Kade Anderson's very good. He led the nation in strikeouts. He's MVP at the College World Series for LSU, won a national championship, just like Paul Skeens 2 years ago. But he's not Paul Skeens. And if you're looking at the college pitchers from the last 2 drafts, I don't think he'd probably go behind Paul Skeens and Chase Dollander. He'd go behind Chase Burns and Hagen Smith last year. What he is he's really solid across the board. Like I don't know, he doesn't have a wipeout pitch. It's not. He's not going to throw 98. He's not going to embarrass you with a wipeout breaking ball. But it's 4 pitches that are probably all above average to plus. He's got good control to go with it of all 4 pitches. He, throws strikes. He misses bats. He's left-handed. He's pretty polished. he did have Tommy John surgery in high school, so that's on his record. But I just think you feel pretty good that this guy's going to be a number 3 or 4 starter in the big leagues. It's not, he's not going to blow you away like Paul Skeens did, but it's a pretty high ceiling and it's a very high floor. So he's probably, as we record this, if I had to guess right now, my life depended on it, I think he goes number 1 overall to the Nationals. But I don't think that's anywhere etched in stone either.
Yeah, that was going to be my next sort of question. I know you're not going to give us like specific picks and recommended bets or anything like that, but Anderson is the heavy favorite to go first in the draft.
Is he? Like how heavy?
Yeah, it's minus 190 on DraftKings and minus 280 on FanDuel. So
who's number 2? I assume Holiday's number 2.
Holiday is 2 on both of those. Yeah, and then there's a
and what are the odds on him? Like I just
plus 170, plus 220 are the 2 different odds I see on Holiday.
Because as you know, I mean, yes, I'm not allowed to offer betting advice per MLB's gambling policy, so I'm not going to do that. But it always fascinates me that you can bet on the draft.
Yeah.
Because there's no real intel. Like honestly, and I'm not trying to say this from you, like there's maybe 4 or 5 of us who actually talk to the teams and talk to the agents and get intel. There are many more people than those 4 or 5 who do mock drafts, and you'll just see. Sometimes I'll see somebody who may be fairly famous, but I know doesn't talk to a lot of people, come out with like a hot take, and it seems like it affects the odds crazily. And I'm just like, there's no basis in that fact. And again, I would not do this, but it's insane that if I just came up with, let's say I just wanted JoJo Parker's going number 1. Like if I tweeted that, the odds would fluctuate immediately. It's right. Like crazy, and nobody knows was that because I go back to the NFL example. The year that Will Levis, somebody on Reddit posted that Will Levis is a family friend, and their family was telling him Will Levis was going number 2. And so I think Will Levis became, I can't remember if it was 1 or 2. I feel like it was 2. In any case, he became like the prohibitive favorite to be the 2nd pick in the draft, and it was just garbage. But it moved the odds based on a Reddit post. So that stuff just fascinates me because nobody really knows how, when people are doing mock drafts, where that information is coming from.
Yeah, and there's, I don't even think I've seen this in past years, but on like DraftKings they have Ethan Holliday plus 170, Aiva Arquette plus 600, and then the next bet is you can do plus 1300 on any other player. So can't be Kade Anderson, Ethan Holliday, or Arquette, but it could be any other player. Do you bet the field or do you bet? Yeah. Like, I think it's giving you the field minus Anderson, Holiday, and Arquette.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, like, do you think it's a narrow group of players in the mix there, or is it just you just don't really know for sure?
Well, we don't know for sure anymore because since they went to the bonus pool system in 2012, it behooves the team that's picking number 1 to entertain as many candidates as possible, just from a negotiating standpoint. Like the first pick in this year's draft is valued at $11 million, and you get a bonus pool based on the assigned value for your top 10, the picks in the top 10 rounds. The first pick isn't going to get $11 million. The record's 9.25. Somebody may break it by just a little bit. They're not. The Nationals are already going to save money they can spend on other picks, but it still behooves them to spend as less money on the guy they want as possible. And it could be a couple different things. You could honestly, like this year where nobody separated themselves, you may like 2 or 3 guys, and you may like them about the same. And so maybe the tiebreaker is one guy signs for $500,000 less, and you can pour into somebody else. Or it could be that you clearly prefer a guy, but you still want to entertain this notion that like again, like I said, I think the Nationals would take Kade Anderson. I don't think it's set in stone. But let's say Kade Anderson is their guy. It still behooves them when they're trying to figure out what Kade Anderson's going to sign for. Have Kade Anderson think, hey, we like Holiday, we like Arquette, we like 4 other guys. So I do think we just did a percentage breakdown on our podcast yesterday. Jonathan Mayo and I both had it as 50% Kade Anderson, 40% Ethan Holliday, and then we distribute a little bit among Aiva Arquette and Eli Willits and Seth Hernandez, but it was all 5% or less. And Jonathan's working on a mock draft right now, and I'll work on one this weekend before the draft starts on Sunday. And Jonathan was saying yesterday he probably would go higher than 50% on Kade. And I think I would too. Like My gut, like again, I would hope my life wouldn't depend on it. My gut says it's Kade Anderson. That's who I would say. But like when we put percentages on it, we also acknowledge like we don't have like this algorithm that we're feeding all this data in. It's just kind of more of a gut feel.
Right.
It just seems like there's more chatter. Other teams are believing more strongly that it's Kade Anderson. So,
and the FanDuel actually has an odds for the second pick, and Liam Doyle is the heavy favorite at -180 to go second. DraftKings doesn't have odds for who's going to go second, but the same level of confidence from the sports books in Liam Doyle going second as Kade Anderson going first. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was going to look. I have I'm checking. Like, so most of the recent mock drafts people have done, they've had Kade Anderson going number 1. And most of the recent mock drafts that people have done, Liam Doyle's gone number 2. My last mock draft, Jonathan's last mock draft, a lot of people's last mock drafts had those as the top 2 picks. Liam Doyle's interesting. He's another college lefty, Tennessee. He led the nation in strikeouts per 9. He's got unhittable fastball. It's probably the best fastball in the draft. Ton of carry and great metrics, and nobody touches it. But it's so good, he throws it like 70% of the time at Tennessee. He'll show you secondary pitches, but he doesn't use them a lot. So you have to project that, like I do think though, the way if you're a team and you're confident in your ability to refine pitching and develop pitching, you're like, okay, there's enough raw material there. We can get them to use those pitches more, and they'll be pretty good. But the other concern with Liam Doyle is I don't know if you've watched video of him.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's hard for me to think of a starter in the big league whose delivery looks like that, and he throws with a lot of intent. So there's more reliever risk with him than some of these other guys. But the Angels, they're interesting because I feel like the first 3 teams all would take Kade Anderson number 1 if he were there. I feel like that would be the favorite if he were there. Good. Ethan Holliday won't go 2 or 3 if he doesn't go 1. I don't think. But the Angels, you hear different things. Like obviously they take guys who get quick to the big leagues. So you hear Doyle a lot. Anderson if he's there. It does feel like among the college lefties, the Doyle is ahead of Jamie Arnold. But like I've heard Arquette there, I've heard Willits there. They've done a lot of work on a couple high school shortstops who are going to go a little bit later in the draft, JoJo Parker and Daniel Pierce, who are probably going in the 8 to 12, 8 to 15 range. And the bonus pool situation I was mentioning before, if a guy takes a physical at the combine, and both of those 2 shortstops, Parker and Pierce, did take physicals at the combine, you can only cut their assigned pick value by 25%. So the Angels' pick value is 10.2. So they'd have to pay either of those shortstops $7.7 million minimum. I don't necessarily think those guys are getting $7.7 million if they go naturally in the draft. And I don't think you can push them down to the Angels' second pick. So it's kind of puzzling why they've done as much work on those guys. It doesn't seem to make sense. Like you could, I guess, take one of them for the max discount at 2 and then push it, hope you're going to get a guy you really want. You saved a bunch of money who goes, I think they pick again at 45 or 47, but at 47, you can't guarantee who, like, even if you say, oh, we'll play player X more money than anybody else will pay him, that doesn't mean somebody else is going to take him before he gets picked 47. So I agree. I don't know what to make of the betting odds, so I'm not going to touch that. But like, I do feel like those are the strong favorites for both those picks. Like that would be my mock. If I were doing a mock today, I would do Anderson and Doyle. I'll even give you a little sneak preview that I could change it. Jonathan's in progress mock. He has Anderson going 1 and Doyle going 2 also. Like that just reinforces what we continue to hear over the past couple of weeks. And Doyle's been tied to the Angels for a month plus. He didn't finish as strong as the other guys, but it was still a pretty good body of work. So but again, if Ethan Holliday goes number 1, then it blows everything up.
Right. Yeah. You could bet Kade Anderson plus.
I could not bet. I cannot bet.
You could not. The listeners who live in certain states could bet Kade Anderson to go second at plus 195 in the event that the Nationals do not take him first. But just to
reiterate, I know you're not trying to. I'm not offering betting advice.
No,
I'm just breaking down who I think is going in the top of the draft. So
absolutely not.
If anybody's listening to this.
Yeah. And I just want to talk a bit more about Liam Doyle before we head to a quick break.
Sure.
He's, I come into this kind of late. Like I don't follow the draft year round. And, Doyle was someone I'd been hearing a lot about early in the year. But then when I kind of went in to do my work on these guys, I just, I prefer Jamie Arnold. I certainly prefer Kade Anderson. I prefer even, Kyson Witherspoon, but like even Tyler Brenmer, I think I like a little bit more than Doyle just because of the delivery you mentioned, just I see more reliever risk with Doyle than those other guys. I don't know if you think that's fair, or if you have any thoughts on Brenmer specifically, who I know is lower than Doyle on the pipeline rankings.
Yeah, it's I think if you're breaking those guys down, like we talked about Kade Anderson, and he doesn't have a standout pitch, but it's the best package, and he's obviously proven a high level. Doyle's got the best fastball in the draft. Like from a fantasy perspective, he could wind up being a closer. Like if he's a reliever, it's not reliever risk in that, he's not a starter. If he's a reliever, he very well might be a closer. So you'd have fantasy value in that. Jamie Arnold has a better delivery, but it's still kind of a lower slot, more of a slingy delivery. It's not a traditional delivery, but he's got a well above average slider and a really good fastball. So he probably has the best two-pitch package of any of those lefties. With Kyson Witherspoon, he's got good stuff. He doesn't have the greatest arm action in the world either. So I think he and Witherspoon are kind of neck and neck, and it's just kind of your preference. I would give the edge to the lefty in Doyle. And also in Jamie Arnold's favor, he's been one of the best pitchers in college baseball for 2 years. With Kade Anderson and Kyson Witherspoon, it's been for 1. So he's got the better track record. And then with Bremner came into the year along with Arnold, ranked as the top 2 college pitchers in the draft. And they got off to a slow start, but he finished real strong. So he kind of moved down the rankings. And he started to move back up. He's really slow. He probably is the best changeup in the draft, or one of the best changeups in the draft. The question with him is he didn't prove himself at the same, he was at UCSB, so he wasn't in the SEC or ACC. He doesn't have a long track record as a starter before this year. And he does have his breaking ball is behind the other guy. So he doesn't have the field of spin that the other guys have. So I think he's pretty good, but he'd probably be behind him. We're going to see. It's not inconceivable that Anderson, Doyle, Arnold could go 1, 2, 3. I don't think it's going to happen, but Anderson is the favorite to go 1. Doyle's the favorite to go 2. Arnold, I think at worst goes 8. There's so much uncertainty because we don't know who's going at the top of the draft. Kyson Witherspoon could go in the top 10. I feel like somebody winds up getting bumped out because guys cut deals. He could wind up, I think I had him at 13 to the Giants in my last mock draft. That's kind of the floor for him. And I think Bremner goes around there. And before we get your commercial break, I'm going to throw in Gage Wood of Arkansas, who when we last saw him pitch, it was literally the best pitching performance in College World Series history, 19 strikeout, no-hitter, where he was a hit batter away from a perfect game. And he struck outside in the 9th. I mean, he looked like he could keep throwing no-hit like 10, 11, 12. Then it would go Harvey Haddix. Like he was not slowing down in the 9th inning. And he's interesting because his fastball is very, very good. It's got all the metrics. Guys cannot touch it. It rides at the top of the zone, and it plays really well. He's got a curveball, so he can go north-south on you. I think his walk rate was only about 5% the last 2 years at Arkansas, so he's throwing a ton of strikes. The question is, he missed 2 months with a shoulder issue. He's had whole shoulder issues off and on going back to high school. So you kind of have that factor. And that's a tough part from the outside. Like, what are teams' medical departments going to say? But you can make a case, Lance Brzezowski, who's going to be honest with the draft, who does a lot of pitching. So he's a pitching guy, and he looks into the metrics. And I work with him at Marquee Sports Network also. Lance is a big pitching guy, and he thinks he's the second best pitcher in the draft, second best college pitcher in the draft from looking at all the data and the performance. And I think you could argue that he's got a better delivery than Doyle or Arnold. But the shoulder question, it's like, where do you value him? But those would be your top 6 college pitchers. There's some other interesting guys as well. That would be your kind of top tier or tier and a half of college arms.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Gage Wood. He is definitely someone that I would have in this mix as well. And it's just like, it's such a weird class, Jim, like you said, just with the lack of college hitters. We'll get to some of these high school shortstops in a second, but just like if you're looking for a star in this draft, I keep looking kind of at the pitchers more than the hitters, which isn't necessarily what you want. But We will head to a quick break here. The night of the draft, I'll be posting my top 30 first-year player draft rankings with write-ups on the top 30 players. Use code YouTube15 to get 15% off RotoWire. The NFFC RotoWire Fantasy Football Online Championship is live. Play fantasy football against your favorite RotoWire experts on NFFC this football season. Jeff Erickson, Nick Whalen, and more will compete in the RotoWire NFFC Online Championship for a shot at $250,000. Sign up for a draft today at rotowire.com/high stakes. That's rotowire.com/high stakes. Can the weather really help a baseball travel further? Turns out, yes. The air can affect how far a baseball carries by up to 20%. Home Run Forecast uses real-time weather data to rate each game's conditions for ball flight, assigning every matchup a 1 to 10 score based on how home run friendly the air is. On the premium site, you'll get game-by-game, hour-by-hour index values, 24-hour forecasts, wind direction, roof status, and more, all for less than $6 a month. Check it out at homerunforecast.com and gain a weather edge before first pitch. Okay, back with Jim Callis here. We're previewing the MLB Draft, which starts Sunday evening. And we talked about the top college arms in this class. How's this for a question for you, Jim? Which college hitter in this class has the best combination of hit and power?
Probably Ike Irish from Auburn, who, from a fantasy standpoint, he's not going to catch. I don't think he loves to catch. He didn't catch full time at Auburn this year, and I think teams are looking at it like his bat is too good. Let's just maximize the bat. He's going to be a right fielder when he comes in the pro ball. So he would interest me from a fantasy standpoint. Just don't think you're getting your catcher of the future. You're going to get, like that. So it's probably him. It's probably Ike Irish.
Yeah, that was kind of sort of what it sort of seemed to be to me as well. Now, Aiva Arquette, who you guys have as the top rank college position player, he's bringing more to the table defensively, obviously, than Irish. What do you envision Arquette's sort of fantasy production being like at the big league level?
Yeah, I can see Aiva Arquette being a average hitter. I don't think he's a plus hitter. I think it's 20 to 25 homer power, maybe a little bit more. The question is, does he stay shortstop? I was visiting my son who lives in Vancouver, Washington, the weekend of the Super Regional. So I went out and watched Jamie Arnold pitch against that loaded Oregon State team. And he moves pretty well short. He's 6'5", though, so you don't see a lot of 6'5" shortstops. So you wonder, is he going to wind up at third base? Where does he wind up ultimately, because he's so big? But yeah, I think he's a solid player. And again, I'm not trying to play down this year's draft. But if you look at last year's draft, which was loaded with position players, like in retrospect, I think he probably goes ahead of James Tibbs, who the Giants traded to the Red Sox and Devers trade. And this is based on what the guys were at the time. Like, so you might take Aiva Arquette over James Tibbs because James Tibbs was a left fielder, but I don't think you would take Aiva Arquette over Cam Smith, and Cam Smith went 14th in last year's draft.
Right.
And Arquette could go. I think he's got an outside chance to go 1 and maybe even 2, and a decent chance to go 3. But I mean, he's going to be probably at worst like the number 6 pick to the Pirates. And like I said, I mean, he probably would go, if you were to put him in last year's draft, he might go around 15th.
Yeah, last year's class last year's class in general just keeps looking better and better.
Well, because we already have Kaggs is in the big leagues, Kurtz is in the big leagues.
Cam Smith has been in the big leagues all year.
Yeah, Cam Smith. So there's 3 guys. Condon's healthy and starting to hit. Bazana, I think, is just coming back from an oblique injury. He's already in AA. JJ Weatherholt looks exactly who people thought he was. Like, if JJ Weatherholt wasn't hurt last year with a hamstring injury, he might have been the number 1 overall pick. And so that's, Christian Moore, I was called Christian Smith. Christian Moore has been up with the Angels. So 4 of the top 14 picks have already been in the big leagues. Braden Montgomery looks great now that he's healthy. So that's what we just listed, 7 or 8 college hitters.
Yeah.
Like last year was a crazy deep class at the top of the draft.
So it seems like, there's the college starters in this year's draft, and there's the high school shortstops, like you mentioned. We touched on Ethan Holliday likely to move to third base. Eli Willits more likely to stick at short. But then you've got, at least for the pipeline rankings, you got Billy Carlson, Steele Hall, and Daniel Pierce as 3 prep shortstops, all ranked in that 7 to 13 range.
And JoJo Parker too, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was, for the purposes of this question, I was just going to ask like how much you think Carlson, Hall, and Pierce are going to hit.
Okay, I got you. Fair enough. I love JoJo Parker's prospect. That's an interesting question. It's because all these shortstops do different things. So Billy Carlson might be the most famous of those guys because he's on the same Corona High School team as right-hander Seth Hernandez. I keep wanting to call him Seth Anderson and combine this crazy lefty-righty super pitcher with power stuff and finesse. Seth Hernandez and Billy Carlson are probably both going to go in the top 10 picks, which will be the first high school teammates ever to go that high in the same draft. So he's probably the most famous. And he's interesting. Like he's probably the toughest these guys figure out from a fantasy standpoint because there's multiple scouts that say he's the best high school defensive shortstop they've ever seen, which doesn't really help you in fantasy unless you're in like a Stratomatic league or something. Mm-hmm. And he's got power. I think it's 20 homer power. Scouts generally don't like his swing and think you're going to have to remake his swing. Now, normally I'd say, man, if you have to remake a guy's swing, how can you take him super high in the draft? But people think, I'm not a hitting guru, that there's easy fixes to make with the swing. So they feel like it's like it's not going to be hard to do. Like, hey, there's some simple changes and he's going to be good. So, but there is some bat risk. Like he might be a below average hitter. So obviously if you're a below average hitter, you might not fully realize your power potential. So that's like a little bit, part of the package. That's the question with him. With Daniel, we'll go with Steele Hall. Hall is interesting because he reclassified to this year's draft, so he's super young. And he's the fastest of all these shortstops we're talking about. He's at least a 70 runner. Some guys say 80 runner. So from a fantasy standpoint, you could see some stolen bases. Like he gives off some Trey Turner vibes at the same stage of their careers. And Turner was not – you didn't think he was going to hit for power. I'm not saying Steele Hall will grow into Trey Turner power, right, but you weren't thinking he was going to have the power that Trey Turner developed into. So he's kind of Trey Turner. He takes a pretty good BP. He sells out a little bit for power in games, so he's going to have to fix that. So I think you'd probably say more of an average hitter. Like if you were tougher and maybe like all these shortstops, you'll get mixed opinions. Like maybe he's a 45 hitter if you don't like him. He's a 50 hitter if you do. Mm-hmm. But you can also see there's some ingredients in there. Maybe he's a slightly above average hitter. I'd say he's probably more of that 12 to 15 homer guy right now. And then Pierce is funny because I feel like he flies under the radar compared to all these other shortstops because, so Ethan Holliday's got the best power in the draft. And Eli Willits, you could argue, might be one of the most well-rounded players in the draft. And Steele Hall's the fastest of these shortstops. And we'll talk about JoJo Parker in a second. He might be the best all-around hitter of all these guys. And Billy Carlson's the best defender. Like Daniel Pierce is not the best in any category. Mm-hmm. But he's pretty solid across the board. And I think he's a better hitter than Billy Carlson or Steele Hall. I think he's a solid hitter. Again, with all these guys, you don't know how they're going to develop physically. I'd probably say it's more 15 homer power than 20 homer power right now. And he can run, he's not Steele Hall fast, but he's a plus runner. So, he might be a 15 homer, 20 steal guy who hits 260, 270. And he's not Billy Carlson at shortstop, but he's a pretty solid shortstop who should have no problem staying there. So I feel like he gets, not necessarily even by the industry, but just among fans or fantasy players, you're not going to hang your hat on any one thing, but he can do a little bit of everything. And I think he's a pretty solid player.
Well, I'm excited to talk about JoJo Parker now since you wanted to talk about him. And does for fantasy do you like the bat enough that you would consider putting him up by like Eli Willits up there, or is it just maybe a notch below that?
Yeah, I think it depends. Like in fantasy, he might be a better fantasy player than Eli Willits. Like as a pro, I think it depends on what you value. Because I do think Eli Willits can stay at short. And Eli Willits is a switch hitter with a plus bat and plus run. Like I said, questions on the power. JoJo Parker, if you were to ask me like you did about the college guys, who's the best combination of hit and power in the high school ranks? It's JoJo Parker. I think he has a chance. If he hits a ceiling, it could be plus hitter, plus power. We went, plus hitter, 25 homer power. I think he's an average runner. I don't think he's going to be a steal guy. He's already 6'2", 200. He'll probably get bigger. He's probably a third baseman. But again, I mean, if you give me a 275, 25 homer guy in fantasy baseball, third base, that works too. So, like if you were looking from a fantasy standpoint at like, okay, who's all around offensive game I had the most confident in? That's probably like, I would think in most years, that's probably the best play. You know, like if you'd have to factor in last year, like you could have said that about Nick Kurtz. Nick Kurtz is a first baseman. So, okay, maybe you factor that in a little bit. But I think it's JoJo Parker is that guy. You know, makeup off the charts. I had a team tell me he interviewed really well at the combine. Where the interviews and the medicals matter really more than the on-field stuff. Although he did take BP. I think he was the highest ranked prospect who actually did work out on the field at the combine. He just figured, why not? You know, it's BP. But I had one team tell me that the traits he showed, like they really, I guess, have drilled down on how to get the most out of these interviews. The traits he showed in his 30-minute interview are the traits associated with a lot of very good big league players. So the makeup on top of it has teams even more excited. And he's interesting. Like I said, you know, the Angels, I do think have interest in him at 2. I don't know if they can really pull the trigger on him at 2 or what the strategy would be there. But he's got interest at 2. He could go 5. He could go 7 to the Marlins, 5 to the Cardinals, 7 to the Marlins, 8 to the Blue Jays, 9 to the Reds, 10 to I don't think he gets past the White Sox, but I don't know if he gets to the White Sox. Like it seems like everybody likes him. I'll be curious to see where he goes.
If anyone wanted to bet, definitely not Jim Callis, and you don't even need to comment on this, Jim.
I will not comment.
If anyone wanted to bet JoJo Parker going second, he's plus 7,500 right now at FanDuel. So there's only like 8 guys listed, 9 guys listed there. So
that's a lot of guys for the number 2 pick, though, which was going what I was saying. There's like all these different scenarios for them.
Right. Yeah, it's gonna be. I mean, is this just kind of a normal year in terms of like how uncertain you are about what's going to happen, or is this more kind of unpredictable than most years?
I feel like there's more options for the teams at the top, is the way I put it. Because like last year, Jonathan and I, we alternate doing mocks, and like for 8 or 9 weeks in a row, we had Travis Bazzana 1, Travis Bazzana 1, Travis Bazzana 1. I don't know what I said when I was on your podcast last year, but at the last moment we decided that we both independently of each other decided that JJ Weatherholt is equally talented to Travis Bazzana, and the Guardians could save more money, so it made sense. And we both switched to Weatherholt at the end, and then they took Travis Bazzana. Year before, I don't think we knew if it was going to be Schemes or Cruz. Like, so I wouldn't say like recently we've known who's going number 1. I'm trying to think. Like 22, we didn't know Jackson Holliday or Drew Jones. I feel like the last time we really knew who was going number 1 was 2020 with Spencer Torkelson. Since then, I don't think anybody's known before the pick was made, or 5 minutes before the pick was made, who's going to be. But what I think is different is I think, you know, like I could rattle off, you know, the Nationals, you know, I think are still kicking the tires on at least 5 and maybe as many as 7 or 8 players. And the Angels might be looking at 7 or 8 players. And the Mariners, I think, similar. So I think the uncertainty is the same, but because people just haven't separated themselves, there's more options, more players in play for the teams at the very top of the draft than there usually would be at this point.
Yeah, that's sort of what it seems like to me. And I feel like there's just a lot of sort of depth and not as many sort of clear sort of tiers kind of in the like 20s and 30s, which is going to make it challenging for those of us that have to rank these guys. But I wanted to ask you about Jace LaViolette from Texas A&M. He's kind of the hitter version of Liam Doyle, where I was hearing a lot about him last fall, last summer, and but didn't really do any digging. And then now that I'm looking at stuff, I'm looking at his numbers from this year: 25% strikeout rate, 252 average. Still seems to be a possibility to go in the first round. But what are your expectations from Jace LaViolette in pro ball?
Yeah, his stock is down some. He came into the year as the top college player, player or pitcher in the draft, candidate to go number 1. Wound up not having his best year. I mean, you could glass half full, glass half empty on him. you point out, I mean, I think he hit 258 or whatever it was, 25% strikeout rate. His in-zone swing and miss rate is a little bit alarming. Like, he strikes out, but he doesn't chase. So that's almost worse than the guy who's swinging at pitches out of the zone. Like, he'll miss some pitches in the zone. Now, that said, he's 6'6", 230. He's got as much power upside as any college player in the draft. He had 68 homers in 3 years at Texas A&M. That's the best conference in the country, pretty significant margin, the SEC. He might be able to play center field. Like, it's a combination of physicality, athleticism, power, but he's not going to go on the top of the draft. I think he probably goes in the 11 to 20 range. If you told me he went higher than that, it wouldn't shock me, because, we rattle off all those high school shortstops, but teams are more comfortable drafting college players. And so even my final mock draft on Sunday, like, teams will be talking up high school players, but then when it gets time to make the picks, it's easier for a team to take a college guy. And so sometimes the college guys seem to move up as you get closer to the draft, the high school guys move down. But I think he'll go in that range. I mean, he's interesting. I mean, he could be a 30 homer guy, 30 homer, 15 steal guy in the big leagues. He might not be a high average guy. He does draw walks. But I mean, he's had a really good college career. But I mean, this was the same. He wasn't as physically developed, but it was kind of the same profile he had in high school. I mean, guys knew who he was in high school. He got offered 7 figures in high school. He could get more than that now after 3 years at A&M. But it was the same thing. Like, he's this big physical athlete with a lot of power, but there's some hit tool questions on him. And 3 years later, he's still kind of that same guy. Like, I feel better about him hitting than, say, we talked last year about Vance Honeycutt, who probably had the highest ceiling of any college player in the draft. But Vance Honeycutt never really hit for average in North Carolina, and he had a career 28% strikeout rate. And if you look, he has not hit at all in pro ball with the Orioles. Mm-hmm. So, like, you do have like LaViolette is a boom bust guy. Like, you can see a scenario where Jace LaViollette's, like I said, 30 homer, 15 steal guy in the big leagues. You also see a scenario where he swings and misses too much and it just never comes together for him. So he probably goes somewhere in the middle of the first round. And that's, when you're talking about this college class, like we talked about Arquette, and I like Arquette, but he's probably an average hitter. He's not a plus hitter. And so, every one of these guys has a question mark, like all the college hitters do. And that's why it's a really puzzling class. And, like, off the top of my head, I mean, I think we'll see Arquette go in the top 6 picks. I think Irish will go in the top 10, 12, 13 picks. You might see a third guy go in the top 13 picks or so, but we might only have 3 college hitters taken in the top 15 or so picks.
Yeah, that's kind of what it looks like. I've got a few college hitters I wanted to get, like, some quick thoughts on you from, but I just wanted to see, like, who is a college hitter that I haven't asked you about yet that you're most excited about in this class, if one comes to mind?
Yeah, I think the sleeper, and I think this guy could go a little bit higher in the draft. We have him ranked 28th. I think that's roughly where other media lists have him. You don't see him very high up in mocks. And it's like, I don't know where he's going to take him. So I don't know if I'm going to put him high, because I'd be kind of dart throwing which team takes him. But Ethan Conrad of Wake Forest is a pretty sneaky good player. And he's flying under the radar a little bit. I don't think for teams, but he's flying under the radar a little bit, I think, in terms of recognition, because he was hurt for most of this year. He was at Marist last year. He had a really good year at Marist, where he had like almost a 1,200 ops. College numbers are down, by the way, this year, like markedly. There aren't as many guys like just crushing the ball. I don't know if it's bats or balls, whatever, but the numbers are down this year in general. And he hit almost 1,200 ops at Marist. He went to the Cape. He finished second in the Cape in hitting. Hit 385 with wood bats, second in the Cape and Cape Cod League in ops. So there's a lot of anticipation about him. He transferred to Wake, and then he injured his throwing shoulder, his left shoulder, diving for ball in March, and had season-ending surgery. So he didn't really get to play much. And put up big numbers at Wake and kind of establish himself. But I think between the Cape and early in the season, scouts saw enough out of him. But he could be, I think he's an above average hitter. I think it's 20 homer power. Maybe there's more in there. I think it's a solid runner. So you could go, I don't know, you could go 20 homer, 15 steal guy for fantasy purposes, as well as hitting for average. He has a chance to play center. I don't know that he sticks there. It probably depends on the team. I don't know if that even really matters in fantasy if you're playing center versus the corners. But I think he's not as good, but it's kind of a similar scenario to Chase DeLauder a couple of years ago, where DeLauder got hurt, broke his foot early in the season, and it wound up lasting 16 picks in the draft. And I kind of feel like he might be the guy who sneaks into that 11 to 20 range on draft day. I don't see him going in the top 10, but he might go pretty soon after the top 10. So he's my sneaky good college position player fantasy play.
I like that call out. Conrad had just a 15% strikeout rate on the Cape too, which is pretty good. I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on Andrew Fisher from Tennessee, who seems like maybe the best first baseman in the class? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, from positional value, like he might be able to play third base. Like I think whoever drafts him will give him a chance to play third base, which would give him more value because of the talent they had at Tennessee, which might have been the most talented team this year. They might have 14 guys drafted, which would tie a record. They just had better options at third, so he wanted to play in first. And I think he finished third in Division I with 25 homers, fourth in Division I with 63 walks. He's an average to maybe tick above as a hitter with plus power and obviously good eye at the plate. I mean, I think the only thing that knocks him down a little bit is the positional value. If he's first base only, obviously that affects him from both a real life value and a fantasy value. But he's one of the better combinations of power and discipline in this year's draft.
Yeah, that was kind of my thoughts on it too. So I'm interested to see where Fisher goes.
Probably in the 20s. I feel like I feel like there's going to be, you could have a little mini run of college guys from about 15 to 20. And they might be preceded by a couple of those pitchers. We're talking about Witherspoon, Bremner, Wood might go top of that. But the college, you might see a little, like from 15 to 21, you might see 5, 6, 7 college hitters taken. And he could go in that range. And if not, then you have a run of about 5 teams in a row that lean high school. So then if he doesn't go there, then it's in the 20s. But yeah, he's attractive to teams.
Jim, do you have a preference out of Mason Neville from Oregon or Devin Taylor from Indiana? A couple college outfielders who kind of intrigue me.
Yeah, it's kind of a matter of taste. I think Taylor's got a better track record. The Big Ten isn't the same level as, say, the SEC, but Devin Taylor has produced since day one. He's played well for 3 years at Indiana. Mason Neville kind of broke out this year at Oregon, which feels weird to say they're in the Big Ten now too.
Yeah.
He went to Arkansas as a freshman and didn't play much, but Neville led the nation in homers this year. I think he's probably got more raw power than Devin Taylor. I think Devin Taylor is maybe a grade better hitter. Neville, better athlete, chance to play center. Devin Taylor is left field all the way, like fringy runner. He's not going to be a stolen base guy. Neville's got solid speed and more defensive upside. I probably like Taylor because I feel a little bit better about the bat. Like in terms of hitting, I think in terms of usable power, it's probably comparable. In terms of, like I said, athleticism, speed, defense, that would be Neville. So like if you're drafting a real life player, those would be factors. I still would probably lean Taylor even in real life as opposed to fantasy, just because I have more confidence the bat's going to play. The track record is just longer than Mason Neville's, and I think the usable power is going to wind up being the same.
So one more college hitter I want to ask you about, and we'll get to some more high school hitters. Charles DeValin of Arkansas. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his last name right, but he just kind of caught my eye based on his just trajectory of from Montreal to a small school, then to Arkansas, and he just had no problem with SEC pitching this year. What are your thoughts on DeValin?
Yeah, he's interesting. I think he's going to go, like, if he snuck into the end of the first round, I could see it. I could see him maybe. I think he's probably going to maybe be in that sandwich area. I think if he gets in the second round, I think he's going to go very early. Like maybe like if the White Sox took him with the first pick of the second round, it wouldn't shock me at all. He unfortunately right now is probably remembered. He's the guy who misplayed the ball in left field against LSU in the College World Series that kind of sparked LSU's ninth inning comeback, and sent LSU on the way to the national title. He's got some Drew Gilbert in him. I don't know if he can play. Like, I think he's quick enough to have a shot at center. They didn't play him in center because Arkansas had a better center fielder, but he's going to get a chance to play center. But he's kind of like a compact guy with a good swing, good on base skills, solid runner. he's kind of in between 15, 20 homer power, but like really strong, really promising bat. Like he's a good, I don't know if you characterize him, sleeper of not really a first round pick, but going to go pretty soon after that. And one of the better hitters, like more polished college hitters in the draft. He'll go pretty good.
So moving back to the prep hitters, we've talked about Holliday, Willits, Carlson, Parker, Hall, Pierce. Who is your next favorite from the high school crop?
In terms of a hitter or just in terms of a position player?
We'll take like kind of a fantasy angle. I don't know if you.
Yeah, I'll throw a few. Like I think there's a few. Like Casey Cunningham's another shortstop who may move to second, who was as good a hitter as there was on the high school showcase circuit last summer. The spring wasn't as strong, but it wasn't terrible. He's a solid to plus runner. He probably moves to second base, but this could be a guy who hits for average, 15 homer power, 20 steal guy. He's interesting. The other guy who is kind of regarded as the best high school hitter on the showcase circuit is a player out of California named Gavin Feen. He probably winds up moving to third base. He's 6'3", 200 already. He has a chance to be a solid hitter with at least 20 homer power. He's interesting. You've got Xavier Nyans is probably right up there with I was going to call him Jackson Holiday, Ethan Holiday in terms of the high school power in this draft. I mean, it's 35 homer potential. I think, he's 6'4", 210, so the swing can get long. There's some swing and miss questions on him a little bit. But like if you want a pure power play, he's super interesting. Josh Hammond is a power hitting guy who projects to third base who's interesting. Slater DeBrune is more of that compact outfielder. Like you don't want to compare all the compact outfielders to Corbin Carroll, but kind of similar to Corbin Carroll at the same stage, where better than average hitter. You aren't sure how much power he's going to have because he's not a big guy. Obviously, Corbin grew into some, well above average speed. So really, a lot of guys like Slater DeBrune. And again, I think it was like I was saying about Steele Hall, where Steele Hall is comparable to Trey Turner at the same stage of their careers. And Trey Turner wound up having more impact than people thought he was going to have. And Corbin Carroll wound up having more impact than you thought he was going to have. So when I compare Steele Hall and Slater DeBrune to those guys, I'm not saying they're going to be that good where they're going to necessarily be getting MVP votes. Mm-hmm. But at the same stage of their careers, that's what Turner and Carroll kind of looked like too.
Yeah, I thought Slater DeBrune, I thought he stacked up really well from a fantasy angle with some of the shortstops we talked about earlier, just with the hit and the speed, and yep. Unsure about how much power is going to come. But yeah, in a class like this, I feel like, you can't get too picky about these guys. Like that, yeah. There's not like a perfect prospect here. So they all come with some flaw or another.
I'm with you. I was going to say Slater probably has a higher floor on his bat and offensive game than most of the high school players.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. What do you think about Sean Gamble from down in, I think he went to IMG, right?
IMG, yeah. He's another guy, like he's a little bit tough one to figure out because you like him to play shortstop and he runs well enough to like potentially play center field. And he played second base at IMG. Part because IMG's loaded, but still, when you're talking about a guy who's going to go in the top 40 picks in the draft, like he's playing second base in high school, like again, it doesn't compare. I mean, IMG is a unique situation where they have more players drafted than any high school almost every year, but it's still weird. But yeah, he's a guy. It's a nice swing. I think it's probably another one of those guys, 15 to 20 homer power, solid speed. He played well on the showcase circuit too. So like I was trying not to like list off 10 guys, but he's also in that mix. Like he's got like a pretty interesting floor. I think it's just a little confusing in terms of like, where do we think this guy, where's he going to wind up playing in the long run? That's still to be determined.
Right. Yeah. Cause I mean, I wasn't focused as much on the defense, obviously from a fantasy standpoint, but that does still matter that he was only playing second base in high school. Quickly, last prep hitter, Quentin Young,
I had a feeling you were going there. So,
nephew of Delman Young, I believe, right?
Yep. Delman and Dimitri. Yep.
What do you think about his hit tool? Obviously, there's the power to dream on and athleticism.
Yeah, he took BP at the combine, and man, he's 6'6", 225, can hit the ball, and he reclassified. He should be a junior this year. He reclassified. He is 18 years old. He looks. It's a big league body. I think the question is he going to hit? I think it was like close to a 25% strikeout rate in high school. There's concerns about the contact, about the ability to recognize and deal with spin. Like that's your like lottery ticket. Like that guy could be a 40 home run hitter, and that guy, it's not unrealistic, or it's certainly a possibility he doesn't hit enough to make it. But he's intriguing. Like we have him ranked 37th on our list, which I think reflects the upside and the risk involved with that one.
Yeah, it seems like from the high school hitters, it seems like there's just a bunch of guys where if you can figure out which guy's going to hit 20 homers instead of 10 homers and play a good defense, that's important. But then there's also these guys with the 30-plus homer potential. If you can figure out which guys are going to make enough contact, then you can hit on those guys.
I mean, my two guys, I mean, we have them ranked high. But for fantasy's perspective, I would take Ethan Holliday over all of them because I think that guy's going to have as much power, especially among the high school crop of anybody in this draft. And then I would take JoJo Parker number 2. I just think JoJo Parker, like I said, that Ike Irish kind of parallel I drew, I think he's the best combination of hit and power and pitch recognition. The scary thing with JoJo is if you look at the track record, the high school competition in Mississippi is not very good. If you look at the track record of high school hitters from Mississippi, it's not very good. Now, that said, Connor Griffin looks really good right now. So, but just that would be the question with him. But yeah, I would go Holiday 1, Parker 2 from a fantasy standpoint.
And I always like to save the prep pitchers for last here, Jim. Seth Hernandez, is he so special that you could see yourself in like a fantasy league using your first pick on him, or would just the prep righty aspect just be too much for you to take him over some of these hitters or college starters?
Well, I would say, I mean, I haven't played fantasy baseball in so long, but if I was playing fantasy baseball and it was a league where you build a farm system, I would favor hitters like everybody would for prospects because of just the attrition with pitch. You're going to hit on more of those guys. They're more likely to be useful trade fodder. Now, that said, I do think Seth Hernandez, ranks among, like, you could argue is the best high school pitching prospect of the last decade, that he could be better than Hunter Green. He could be better than Jackson Jobe. And he's like, you always have the risk of injury with any pitcher. Like the high school, like Kade Anderson already had Tommy John surgery. And a lot of college pitchers wind up getting hurt in pro ball too. But Seth Hernandez is kind of like a college pitcher in a high school pitcher's body, if you will, high school pitcher's clothing, because he's a 4-pitch guy. He's up to 100. He's got one of the best changeups in the draft. He can spin 2 power breaking balls. He's 6'4". He's athletic. He throws strikes. He repeats his delivery. I think, he's like the high school guys with his kind of stuff and polish. Those guys move quick. So he could be in the big leagues in a couple of years. Like I wouldn't be shocked if he's in the big leagues. Well, I would say his ETA for me would be 2028. Like I think he could be in position to make an opening day 2028 roster. And he might even be quicker than that because his stuff is that good. And those type of guys move real quick. You do have the concern about guys getting hurt and guys who throw hard at such a young age. Even at the big league level or even the college level, the guys who throw the hardest get hurt more often. It's an inescapable part of throwing hard, unfortunately, in today's climate. But so from a fantasy standpoint, from a pit, like you look at, so like I would take some of the hitters over him just because I think they're more apt to provide me value either at the big league level or in fantasy trades quicker. When I'm looking at pitchers and like this is a very muddled high school crop, I'd probably take him I'd probably take Kade Anderson 1 because I think he's gonna get there quick. I might take Seth Hernandez over Liam Doyle or Jamie Arnold or any of the other college arms because I think he's got a better combination of stuff and polish than any of them, and delivery, the way he does it. So I probably would take, and I could argue, depending on my fantasy, if I had a good team and I'm looking at, I can, put a little more risk. Like I think he's got more upside than Kade Anderson.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think a lot of people are going to look at this class for fantasy and say that Seth Hernandez has the highest ceiling, and I think it's just muddled enough that this is maybe going to be the highest the top prep pitchers gone in fantasy drafts in a long time, just because there isn't that bulk of like college impact guys at the top. And Ethan Holliday I think is going to be the consensus number one guy, but it just seems like a year where people are going to talk themselves into Seth Hernandez very high in fantasy.
Yeah, and he's got as much power. Not as much power, but he'd be an interesting prospect as a hitter. They're not going to two-way him, but he's got a lot of power too. And I do think he's probably the most talented player in the draft. So I would probably take him pretty high.
Who's your last question, Jim? Who's your second favorite prep pitcher in the class?
Oh, that's easy. That would be Cruz Schoolcraft. Now, I don't know where he's going to go, and he's committed to Tennessee, and how signable he's going to be because it's not going to be cheap. But he's super talented too. He's a 6'8", 230-pound lefty. A little inconsistent this spring, but I mean the guy's 18. He turned 18 in April. He's young. He's 6'8", so of course he's going to be consistent. But man, he's up to 97 with the fastball. He's got a power slider. He's got feel for a changeup. He's actually a pretty interesting hitter too. And if he gets to Tennessee, I'll be curious if he plays both ways, or if it'll be a situation where it's like, man, that left arm's too valuable. You're just going to focus on pitching. But it would be Cruz Schoolcraft. If we were just ranking players on pure ceiling in this draft, he's probably in the top 5, and that might be low. It might be top 3. It's crazy, crazy ceiling.
So we could have a 6'8" two-way player in.
Well, he's not going to play two-way in pro ball. But yeah, you could in college, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, great, Jim. I know you're going to be really busy Sunday, Monday, etc. What's your schedule looking like for your coverage of this draft?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think of times of these. I'm going to get these times wrong, I think. I know the Sunday times. Sunday, our coverage on MLB net. Well, first I'll have a final mock draft. So I will spend the weekend after I get to Atlanta working on mock draft that'll be out in the wee hours Sunday morning before the draft. And I don't know, I'll probably effortlessly or in vain try to get more intel Sunday to figure out who is going number 1 so that I can lock people in. And we'll see how that goes. Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern, we'll have an hour-long preview show for the draft on MLB Network. At 6 o'clock, we will begin the broadcast on MLB Network. This year will be the first 3 rounds, not top rounds, but the top 3 rounds. Then day 2, I want to say it's 11:30 Eastern time. I have so much fun. I basically at this point, point me to where I need to be at which time, and I will be there. I'm pretty sure it's 11:30.
That's what I've got. Yeah.
Okay, good. Eastern, good. I'm glad. Then good. I'm not giving up that information. 11:30 Eastern on Monday. We're going to do rounds 4 through 20 on MLB. That'll be streaming on MLB.com. Now, we will do rounds 4 through 10 will be like the top 10 rounds in recent years, where Jonathan and I, along with Melanie Newman, will be giving you information on every player. Hopefully we will know, I won't say off the top of my head because I will have a bunch of notes in front of me, but hopefully we will know about 90, 95% of the players. We will have information. The other 5 or 10%, we will be texting our scout friends to get information live while on the air. We will not have to do that for rounds 11 through 20, even though 4 through 20 is all in one day instead of 2 days. Rounds 11 through 20 will simply be conference call, teams picking players, and I think there'll be a break. We'll fill a couple breaks, and if the conference call glitches, we might jump on and fill some dead air. But rounds 11 through 20, we will not have to, even though it is day 2 now, provide you with information on all 300 players in rounds 11 through 20. We will not be doing that.
Well, Good luck, Jim. It's going to be a busy few days for you, and obviously a busy stretch leading up to this, but I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today. If you're not a RotoWire subscriber, use code YouTube15, and you'll be able to follow along as I write up every pick from night one, Sunday at rotowire.com. Thanks for listening.